isn't unusual, because the research around from not that Ned Flanders, a different Ned Flanders, right? So Flanders here got massive funding to do research into classroom talk. Massive. I don't know how many people he interviewed, but he had teams of researchers working with him. And he found that the talk in classrooms broke down into very convenient 2/3 rules. So 2/3 of all the talk in classrooms was teacher talk. 2/3 of all the teacher talk were questions asked by the teacher talk, and 2/3 of the questions were closed, one right answer questions. So you might say, Mary, that was the 70s. But Tizard and Hughes, Edwards and Mercer, Galton, Robert Alexander's work in the noughties on dialogue, and Brian Murphy in UCC that I quoted my own stuff, and Concan, Gibney and Murphy in 2010, and there's more coming out, show that people think oral language development and dialogue only belong in the baby infant classes. And once they can talk, forget about it, go on with the reading and writing. The real business of teaching is what Brian Murphy said teachers talked about. And that was a review of the 99 curriculum that he did in 2004. So the research would suggest that there is a challenge to teachers who want to be dialogical. And it's worse it's getting. The research on wait time is actually worse. Not the research is worse. The wait time is shorter. So, but again, I wasn't kind of going there when I was in NQT. I was a rookie teacher, terrified of inspectors. Everybody in our school was either a first or second diploma. So there was a restricted lens through which childhood was viewed. And I had come from that, the children would be seen and not heard. The size of the class, as I said already. A lack of authentic child-centeredness. The 71 curriculum was heavy on Piagetian and child-centeredness, but the practice wasn't. The practice was chalk talk domination. There was little or no professional reading. Any professional reading I did, I stumbled upon it, So again, that language of critique was missing. And it was a very gendered profession. And, I was in Carysford, we were in dormitories. A few of us here are in post-traumatic stress after it. But, you didn't have a voice. You had to appear at breakfast, even if you weren't having a lecture until 11 o'clock. You had to be down at breakfast at 20 to 8 or whatever it was, or mass before that. Meanwhile, over in Pat's, my brother was over there. He had a room to himself, and he could decide whether or not he went to lectures, let alone to breakfast. So, we're looking at people trained to be assistant teachers who will be yes, sir, and people who are trained to be maybe pre-vigi.
The masters.
And the masters, and we were the mistress.
The masters.
The bad
and
sense
the
of
teachers.
Yeah, absolutely, and no critical thinking. So I had to go and take some action eventually. Now it took the thinking and the critical thinking around the masters to poke this out to me. But prior to that, there was a couple, I'll talk about this messy thing in a minute, there were a couple of serendipitous things as well that I stumbled upon the work of Philomena Donnelly, so I'll talk about that in a moment. There was no singular kind of linear effort here. Nothing I can say I went from A to B to C to D. And Miller talks about that very well in his work, Messy Methods. And I would dabble and I would try to improve things, but it wasn't sustainable. I'd try something new out and I'd try something new out. Nothing worked really because I wasn't changing my own practice. I was reverting back to whole class didactic teaching. And then stumble upon, I read Sylvia Ashton Warner's Teacher about working with Maori children. I read Sybil Marshall's Experiment in Education. I read John Holt, How Children Fail and How Children Learn, his other book. I read Margaret Donaldson, who threw out a lot of what Piaget, well, she didn't throw it out, she revised a lot of Piaget's ideas. And I read Maxine Green. And I joined an association that Philomena Donnelly had started with Joe Dunn in Pat's, the Association of Teachers of Philosophy with Children. So it was taking that Lippmann philosophy, P4C, and making it in suit an Irish context. And I started my MA in action research with Jean McNeill. So those kinds of things sort of fell in place around the same time. And I wanted to use all of these ideas that were bubbling up here, to how could I facilitate discussions by sitting as a member of a circle with the children, because that's what I had seen modelled in Philomena Donnelly's practice, and talking with them. And we'll talk about the time factor and all the rest in a minute. And I began with read-alouds of picture books that were short enough to be read in one session. At this stage, that's all my criterion around the picture books was. I had no idea how complex these things were. And they were intriguing enough that they would generate and promote classroom discussion. I had no idea of the complexity, the sophistication. There are books here you would not do in a primary school. They're so harrowing, you know. Really, really, really amazing picture books. Follow me on Twitter, Prepare to be Beggared. I will recommend books to you good up. And they're doable at post-primary. And I would take some of those in and do them at third level. And I'll show you bits about those in a minute. So we discussed the picture books, and this was amazing. The incidental and the unplanned learning outcomes were amazing. And I decided to study it for the MA and developed it for a PhD. I was working in an inner city, all boys, extremely disadvantaged school. It didn't have DESH status because that wasn't a factor at the time, but it would qualify for DESH. It did subsequently qualify for DESH status. So the research approach, I deliberately chose this form of research with advice, obviously, from my supervisor, because of these ontological and epistemological values that would be carried out with the pupils and their parents and colleagues, and not carrying out research on the children. So the children were given transcripts of discussions and read them back to the very small ones. The parents were invited in to see what was happening. The transcripts went home. So everybody was involved. And I was the focus. My teaching was the focus. So I wasn't researching the children and what they said. I was researching what I was doing. And this was explained in the ethics statements to all the stakeholders, and I had permission. And now I had permission to film the children, but to keep the videos in my possession, so we'll have to edit out the videos. So please, nobody film any of the videos here. Because the research statement, ethics statement, was written in 2001, before the internet was a big thing. And it was situated within Whitehead's living educational theory. And the pupils participated, evaluated data, and were kept appraised and aware of the research at all times. In fact, they got very bossy with me about it and started to tell me when to do it. And they would watch the videos afterwards, they would read the transcripts, the colleagues would sit in on sessions, and they would all provide critical feedback. Not everybody bought into this, so I'm really getting critical feedback here. And they also evaluated data, and they acted as critical friends. And Maureen Glenn, I remember, asked me one day, what's so special about what you're doing? Sure, wouldn't any good teacher do this? And I remember having to go home and think and think and think. I said, well, maybe they do, but this is me doing it, and this is the way I'm doing it, so that's the best I can do right now for an answer. And keeping a reflective journal, the autobiographical lens, was core. And reflexivity can happen when you go back to visit those early journal entries as well. And some of the most productive pieces of data came about when the children would suddenly interrupt a lesson and say, teacher, you should be filming this for our research, and this is what happened in this particular little bit. And you can see in the next clip that I show you, or the first clip I show you, that knowledge is made publicly accountable and reasoning is visible in the talk. Now, we were talking about the Amazon in geography, and somebody said, oh, they're cutting down all the trees, and it's McDonald's fault. These are small children now, so they have pretty simplistic views, and it's McDonald's fault. And Chloe then said, teacher, you should be filming this for your research. And she was over like a bee to the press where the camera was held and the tripod. We went into the empty room next door, and this is what happened. So I'll only play you a bit of this. Do you see where I'm coming from? I got to know these children in a very different way because of doing this work. So I initially transcribed the conversations using a makeshift shorthand and would write them out. And often I'd see things that night as I transcribed that I had missed during the heat of the discussion. And I would read, for very young children, read the transcripts back to them, and they were very accurate as to, no, I didn't say that, that was Heidi said that, or I didn't say that word, I said this word, you know, so they were very, very clear on this. And it was non-scientific, but it provided me with several initial thoughts. for example, in writing down what the children said, I was openly valuing them and honouring their contributions. And they responded, and that seemed to up the ante a little bit, lift their performance. And Jack Whitehead makes that point, that coming to a conference and having to present actually forces you to scrutinise your presentation a little bit more. There was a lot of emerging significance from this early work. Like I noticed that there were 3 children who attended learning support classes, and they were growing in confidence, and they had become quite vocal in the discussions. And this improved confidence then was kind of linked to this oral language work, because they were saying this work is a DOS. And by a DOS they meant no pencil. Do you know, PE is a DOS, dancing is a DOS, art is a DOS, singing is a DOS, because there's no pencil involved. So, and it was remarked on at the time by the learning support teacher and by parents, so I had that data as well. In this little clip I'm going to show you now, I had read a story called Something Else about a little creature who lived all alone and was not like the other creatures. And then we had a discussion on it. So I just want you to, and the children in this